In March 2008, a crime occurred in the small town of Emory, Texas, that shocked the whole of America. A 17-year-old girl named Erin Caffey helped two of her acquaintances kill her entire family in cold blood, including her younger brothers, 13-year-old Matthew and 8-year-old Tyler. The brutal murder committed in the middle of the night left a deep mark on the consciousness of a small town and caused a storm of emotions throughout the country. Many could not believe that such a young girl could have initiated such a monstrous crime. Erin Caffey, the eldest daughter in the family, was a typical American teenager raised in a deeply religious family. But behind the girl's outward well-being was a growing hatred for her parents. This story is not only about a monstrous crime, but also about the complex dynamics between teenagers and their parents, about the influence of the environment and hidden experiences that can lead to disaster. How and why did Erin decide to destroy her family? What made her take this terrible step? The answers to these questions became the subject of a large-scale investigation, trial, and public unrest that followed the tragedy. Erin Caffey grew up in the small town of Emory, Texas, a city with a population of just over 1,000 people, where almost everyone knew each other. Erin lived with her parents, Terry and Penny Caffey, respected people in the local community, and two younger brothers, Matthew and Tyler. The Caffey family was deeply religious and adhered to strict Christian principles. They attended church regularly, and faith played a central role in their lives. They lived a simple but fulfilling life. Their house was modest, but it was rich in the sounds of laughter and music. Music played a central role in the family's life. They sang and played various instruments on weekends at their church. Bible study and prayer classes were a regular part of their routine. Many in their community viewed Caffey as an exemplary Christian family embodying the values and principles of their faith. Terry Caffey, the head of the family, was a devoted husband and father who worked several jobs to provide for the family. Penny, Erin's mother, was a caring housewife who devoted her life to raising children. Their home has always been full of love and warmth. Erin, the eldest daughter in the family, grew up in this harmonious environment. Everyone who knew her described the girl as a sweet and obedient daughter. It was as if she personified all those values that were dear to her parents, which made her stand out from the rest. Erin went to a local school, where she excelled in academic performance and was an active participant in school events. She played the violin in a church orchestra, sang and dreamed of going to college after graduation. Everyone who heard the girl singing said that she had an angelic voice that fascinated listeners. However, like many teenagers, she was going through a difficult period of personal formation, which is often accompanied by conflicts with her parents. When Erin was 16 years old, she met Charlie Wilkinson. Charlie was 18 at the time. He grew up in a single-parent family. He was not particularly interested in studying, had no serious hobbies, and called himself a restless bumpkin. The guy drove around Emory and the surrounding area all day in a dead 91-year-old Ford Explorer. They met at a local Sonic restaurant when Erin was working there part-time. Their romance began to develop rapidly. Charlie Wilkinson was a local boy whose life was very different from the bubble in which Erin grew up. Their bond was instant and intense, and quickly evolved from casual acquaintance to something deeper. There were few people in Charlie Wilkinson's life who were truly close to him. The guy had a pretty strong relationship with his father, but his stepmother could not replace Charlie's mother. Instead, the role was taken by the mother of one of Charlie's good friends, Teresa Myers. Charlie often talked to her and shared with Teresa his experiences and plans for life. Teresa listened to him attentively and tried to help the young man with advice, feeling that he really needed someone's participation, and that he had no one else to turn to. She, in turn, also became attached to the boy and saw him as one of her sons. According to Teresa and other acquaintances, Charlie really felt some kind of restlessness, some sense of loneliness and sadness. It was as if he was looking everywhere for his people, approval and acceptance, as if he wanted to find a family and a place that he could call home. By the age of 17, Charlie had serious drinking problems. He always had a bottle of bourbon under his pillow and a case of beer under his bed. At school, teachers began to notice that Wilkinson often fell asleep in class and showed no interest in studying. The reason for this could be alcoholism and a disorderly lifestyle. According to Teresa Myers, Charlie still had plans for life. After school, he was going to join the armed forces, for which he regularly attended a training camp for recruits in Oklahoma and once a month participated in training camps in Greenville. After the army, he planned to go to college and continue his education in business management, take out a bank loan, and open his own car repair shop. The guy was very fond of cars. The plan was laid out for 10 years ahead. Teresa Myers treated Charlie like her own son and of course was glad that Charlie had such a clear plan. But the only thing that worried the woman was that lately Charlie had completely lost his head from love for the girl from the cafe. Teresa warned the guy to be careful with his feelings and not to have high hopes for a relationship with Erin. She told Charlie, "You'll graduate from high school and join the army, and Erin will stay here, and she's unlikely to be waiting for you." Charlie nodded his head understandingly but seemed to grow more and more attached to Erin. Young people began to spend all their free time together. As the relationship progressed, Charlie also became the center of Erin's life. Erin gave herself completely to this relationship. The young people seemed to be crazy about each other. At that moment, Charlie gave Erin a promise ring that belonged to his grandmother. This gesture symbolized his deep commitment to Erin despite their young age. Of course, the teenager's heart melted. At first, her parents welcomed their relationship, but soon they began to notice that Charlie was having a negative effect on their daughter. Deciding to get to know the guy better, Terry and Penny turned to the internet, and what they found did not please them at all. Charlie shared links to alcohol and sexualized content on his MySpace page, which was very different from the values that his parents laid down in Erin. Her worried parents demanded that she limit her communication with Charlie, which only angered her and increased her desire to be with him. Erin's academic performance began to decline at school, and friends noticed how she became distant and stopped attending church events. Soon their relationship became the cause of constant quarrels in the family. Erin began to distance herself more and more from her parents, who did not support her choice. In the house where laughter and music used to sound, now there was only discord. Terry and Penny Caffey, in an attempt to protect their daughter from possible mistakes, began to introduce strict rules: limit her meetings with Charlie, forbid her to be alone with Charlie, and demand explanations for her obnoxious behavior. But such measures only increased Erin's resistance. Her teenage stubbornness and desire for independence became the cause of constant conflicts in the house. Soon she began to spend more and more time away from home, finding solace in the company of Charlie and his friends. These conflicts only strengthened her determination to prove her independence and defend the right to choose in her life. Erin's parents may have underestimated the depth of her resentment. They could not imagine that their daughter, raised in love and religious values, could have changed so much. The atmosphere in Caffey's house was heating up every day. Erin became increasingly hostile and distant. She stopped participating in family activities and avoided talking to her parents. Whenever Terry or Penny tried to talk to her, she accused them of not understanding her and not letting her live her own life. Each new conversation turned into a quarrel, which only made the situation worse. The situation escalated to the limit when Erin found out that her parents were going to confiscate her phone to limit her communication with Charlie. This was the last straw for Erin. She felt trapped in her own home, where her freedom and desires were ignored. In response to her parents' actions, she began to take more radical steps to get her way. The teenage rebellion, which at first expressed itself in stubbornness and disobedience, turned into something darker. She started wearing as revealing clothes as possible. Sometimes the jeans sat so low and hugged the figure so tightly that some parishioners, barely noticing the girl in the church, shyly averted their eyes. Charlie Wilkinson supported her in this rebellious mood. Instead of trying to convince her to mend her relationship with her parents, he started adding fuel to the fire. Charlie told Erin that her parents would never let them be together, and that they would do anything to separate them. These conversations only increased her hatred of her family and her desire to find a way to be with Charlie, no matter what. Later, Erin and Charlie's relationship began to undergo changes. Their love was becoming like an obsession. Charlie began to behave like a jealous possessive. Whenever Erin talked to someone, even to her friends from church, he immediately appeared next to her and looked at the people around her with such a look as if he were saying, "Stay away, she's mine." In turn, Erin was also not shy about controlling Charlie. According to Wilkinson's acquaintances, the girl did not like the fact that he was spending time with someone other than her. Charlie's close friends said that Erin was not at all the blonde, modest angel that everyone used to think of her as, but a very cynical and thoughtful lady who knows how to manipulate people. Erin didn't like Charlie's friends, and the guy gradually began to move away from them. Erin once convinced Wilkinson that his best friend Justin Myers, Teresa's son, showed an unequivocal interest in her, and even pinned her in the car a couple of times. Charlie was infuriated by these words, but trying not to make hasty decisions, he went to the Myers house and talked for a long time with Teresa there and calmed down a little. According to Teresa, Erin clearly manipulated Charlie and shielded him from his friends, which gradually deprived him of the interests and plans that the guy had. The young people were constantly quarreling, they broke up, then got back together, and it drove Wilkinson crazy. On January 18, 2008, when Charlie was with his friend Justin Myers, Erin called him and complained in a hysterical voice that her mother had hit her in the face. The guy immediately went to the police and wrote a statement against Erin's mother. However, later that day, he withdrew his statement, explaining that he had talked to Erin again and she told him that she and her mother had reconciled. After this incident, Erin's parents tightened the rules for her even more. They forbade her to go to work, took her car keys, and forbade her to communicate with Charlie. But this did not prevent the loving couple from meeting in secret. Over time, Charlie became angry that he couldn't openly date his girlfriend. The prohibitions of her parents pushed him to different thoughts. He started thinking about how to solve this problem, and the first thing that came to mind was Erin's pregnancy. He thought that after learning about the pregnancy, her parents would kick her out of the house, and this would bind them together forever. Then he suggested an option in which they would run away and hide until Erin turned 18. Erin listened to him, and then suddenly told Charlie that the only option was if her whole family died. Charlie thought she was joking. However, as the rules for Erin became tougher, the girl raised the topic of the murder of her family more and more often, and Charlie took her words more seriously each time. He tried to convince Erin, but the girl continued to say that if he really loved her, he would do what she asked. When a guy didn't do what Erin asked, she openly started flirting with other guys. She knew that she would influence Charlie in this way. He was terribly jealous of her. Eventually, the guy recognized Erin's idea as the only possible solution to their problems, and the young people began planning the details. Charlie and Erin were very serious. Wilkinson planned to hire a hitman for his parents, but he was worried about the issue of Erin's younger brothers. Charlie did not want the boys to get hurt, and Erin promised him that she would arrange everything so that the brothers would not be at home that day. The couple began searching for a man to play the killer. Wilkinson chose his friend, 21-year-old Charles Wade, a guy with a difficult reputation. According to some, Wade was a very friendly young man, but most still considered him a sullen and hateful guy. Charlie knew what to offer Wade. He promised him that he would take all the money and jewelry that they would find in the house. Wade decided that this was his chance to get rid of his financial problems. Wade suggested specific steps that could lead to success. He was known for his criminal past, and his involvement made Erin and Charlie's plans even more sinister. When Charlie started talking about her younger brothers again, Erin began to assure the guy that the best thing for them was death than being sent to an orphanage. And in the end, Wilkinson agreed with her. After their dirty work was done, they wanted to drown the bodies in the lake, then thought it was too much trouble and decided to set fire to the house. They decided to attack at night when everyone would be asleep. Charlie was supposed to kill the parents, and Wade was supposed to kill the boys. From that moment on, Erin couldn't back down. Every new day, every new quarrel with her parents only strengthened her resolve. An image of her parents as enemies that needed to be eliminated at all costs formed in her head. She stopped seeing them as her loved ones and loving people, and in her mind, they turned into an obstacle on the way to her happiness. She became increasingly aloof, and her thoughts were completely engrossed in the upcoming event. In her imagination, this night was supposed to be a release, an act of revenge, and the beginning of a new life with Charlie. The murder plan was carefully thought out. Erin described in detail the layout of the house and the daily routine of her family. She told me where her parents and brothers sleep, how best to get into the house, and when to do it so as not to attract the attention of neighbors. She also suggested disabling the alarm to make it easier for Charlie and Charles to enter. Wilkinson stole a Browning .22 caliber pistol from his father, and Wade decided to take 2 samurai swords with him. They bought masks and gloves to hide their identities and leave no traces. When everything was ready, Erin and her accomplices chose the night to carry out their plan. It was the point of no return for all 3 of them. They were sure that their plan would work, and that after that they would have a new life, free from all restrictions and obstacles. The night of March 1st, 2008 came, Erin, Charlie, and Charles were ready to commit the crime they had been planning for so long. The terrible tension was growing by the minute, but none of them wanted to back down anymore. Erin, being in her house, carefully prepared everything for the arrival of Charlie and Charles. She secured their access to the house by disabling the alarm and leaving the door open. Erin knew that her brothers and parents were sleeping peacefully. Around 2 a.m., Charlie Wilkinson and Charles Wade broke into Caffey's house. Charlie was good at navigating in the dark, as it was not the first time he had been in their house. The guys approached the master bedroom. They did not calculate the force and the door banged loudly against the closet. Mr. Caffey immediately woke up and saw two silhouettes. He heard a familiar voice and immediately realized who was in front of him. The first victim was Erin's mother, Penny Caffey, who was sleeping closer to the door. Wilkinson was shot at Penny several times. He then handed the gun to Wade, who fired several times at Terry Caffey, who was lying next to him. When the gun jammed, Wade decided to finish Penny off with a knife and inflicted fatal blows. Deciding that Terry would not survive after receiving 5 gunshot wounds, the criminals went to the rooms of the younger brothers Matthew and Tyler. The boys, who woke up from the noise, tried to hide, but they were quickly found in the room of the older sister. This made the task more difficult for Charlie, who expected the boys to sleep. Terrified, Matthew held a knife in his hands, but the criminals realized that he would not be able to use it. Wilkinson ordered the boys to go to their bedroom. In the hallway, Matthew pushes Charlie, and Wade, who was following them, immediately shot the boy in the head. Tyler screamed, "No, Charlie. Why are you doing this?" At that moment, 2 swords pierced an 8-year-old boy as well. Downstairs, the father of the family, Terry, bleeding and losing consciousness, heard his children dying. Erin, being in the other room, also heard the screams of her brothers, and despite the horror of what was happening, did not try to stop her accomplices. After killing the whole family, the guys went to clean the house. They collected everything: Penny's jewelry box, cleaned out the safe, pulled out all the money from their wallets, and even Tyler and Matthew's pocket change. To hide the traces of the crime, Charlie and Charles had to set fire to the house so as not to leave any evidence behind. They set fire to the furniture and left the crime scene with Erin, who was excitedly waiting for them in the car with Wade's girlfriend Bobby. They quickly left the scene of the crime, leaving behind a house on fire and a destroyed family. However, contrary to their expectations, Terry Caffey, although severely injured, miraculously survived. Wounded and covered in blood, he was able to get out of the burning house and crawl 400 meters to the nearest neighbor's house, where he was able to ask for help. When the police arrived at the scene, they found the ruins of Caffey's house and the bodies of Penny, Matthew, and Tyler. Signs of a struggle, blood and ashes testified to a terrible night of violence. An investigation was launched that was supposed to bring to light the whole truth about what happened and about Erin's. When Terry Caffey miraculously survived and reached the neighbors, he was in critical condition. Despite his severe injuries, his main desire was to tell about what happened in their house. Police and paramedics arrived at the scene and immediately took him to the hospital. But even under the influence of painkillers, Terry was able to tell investigators about the attack. He saw the face of one of the attackers, and it was Charlie Wilkinson, the boyfriend of his daughter Erin. The criminals, meanwhile, drove around the city and later arrived at the trailer of Charles Wade's brother. Charlie asked Wade's brother to wake him up at 8 a.m. for military training to provide himself with an alibi. He knew that if questioned, the owner of the trailer would confirm that Charlie had been at his house at night and left early in the morning to pack. Then Charlie and Erin retired to the spare bedroom to spend time together. After the bodies of the dead were identified, Erin's location was unknown. Terry was afraid that Charlie might kidnap his daughter. Detectives immediately went in search of Charlie. They soon find Wilkinson's car at Matthew Wade's trailer, and with it the suspect himself. They detain him because they noticed traces of blood on his shoe. But they couldn't go any further into the house because they didn't have a search warrant. During the interrogation, Charlie quickly confessed to what he had done and talked about all the participants in the crime, and especially about the role of Erin. He talked about Charles Wade and his girlfriend Bobby Johnson, who was waiting for them outside in the car. The police managed to find the last 2 fairly quickly, and they willingly told their version of what happened. Charles said that Wilkinson had deceived him, and he managed to take away only $200 in cash, although he was promised at least $2,000. Bobby claimed that she tried to persuade Erin to change her mind and stop their plan, but she did not listen to her. After these statements, the police obtain a search warrant for Matthew Wade's trailer. While the officers were inspecting the house, they noticed a blanket lying on the floor near the closet. One of them lifts the blanket expecting to find any evidence under it, but instead sees in front of him what at first he takes for a large doll folded on the floor in the fetal position. When he tries to lift this doll by the hair, she suddenly opens her eyes. The doll turns out to be 16-year-old Erin Caffey. The girl looks like she is in deep shock. She refuses to move and answer questions. When the girl is taken to the hospital, she still looks lost and says she doesn't understand what's going on. She told the police that she was abducted by 2 unknown men, drugged her with illegal substances, and kept her in a dark room for several days, and then suddenly released. The detectives, realizing that one of the 4 is lying, decide to observe Erin's reactions. They notice that she often asked about her parents, but it seemed strange that she never asked about the fate of her brothers. They also found that the clothes they found Erin in didn't smell like burning at all, and the toxicological examination indicated the absence of any foreign substances in the blood. At this stage, due to sufficient grounds, the police detain Erin Caffey. Her father Terry will have to hear the difficult truth about his daughter, which will finally break his heart. When Erin realized that her attempts to hide her involvement had failed, she also began to testify. At first, she tried to downplay her role, claiming that she was under pressure from her boyfriend. But investigators have gathered enough evidence to show that Erin not only participated in the crime but was also its initiator. These confessions became the basis for bringing charges against all participants. Erin, Charlie, and Charles were arrested on charges of first-degree murder, arson, and a number of other serious crimes. The evidence against them was undeniable: the testimony of the surviving father, their own confessions, and numerous pieces of evidence from Caffey's house. The trial of Erin Caffey, Charlie Wilkinson, and Charles Wade attracted widespread attention. People all over the country followed the developments, marveling at the cruelty and ruthlessness of this crime. At trial, the prosecution presented evidence indicating that Erin was an active participant in the crime. Prosecutors provided correspondence between Erin and Charlie, in which they discussed the details of the attack, as well as testimony from Charlie and Charles which directly indicated that Erin was the initiator of the crime. Also, a witness came forward from the prosecution. He was Erin's ex-boyfriend Michael, whom she dated for 2 months before meeting Wilkinson. He told the court that she was a pretty sweet girl, with pleasant and friendly parents, but one day she shared with him that she planned to hire a hitman to end her family. Erin had told him that her parents never liked her choice of boyfriends, and that her mother is suffocatingly controlling. Erin, realizing that she could not escape responsibility, also admitted her involvement, but tried to present herself as a victim of circumstances. She claimed that she was under intense pressure from Charlie, and that her actions were motivated by fear of losing him. Her defense line was based on the fact that she was underage and influenced by an older young man. Prosecutors insisted that Erin was fully aware of her actions and deliberately orchestrated the murder of her family. They stressed that her actions were motivated not only by love for Charlie, but also by a strong feeling of hatred towards her parents for their attempts to control her life. This is not just a youthful mistake, prosecutors said. It was a brutal and cold-blooded murder, carefully planned and executed. Psychiatrists who studied Erin's personality, of course, diagnosed her with some problems, but concluded that she was absolutely sane. One of them even later shared, "I've worked with a lot of liars, but she surpassed them all." The key witness for the prosecution was Terry Caffey, the only surviving family member. His testimony was filled with deep grief and despair, but he strongly advocated for justice to prevail. He described the events of that terrible night, talked about the attack and his struggle for life, as well as how shocked he was to learn that his own daughter was involved in this crime. "I can't understand how my own daughter could do this," Terry said in court, his voice shaking. "I've always loved her and wanted the best for her. It wasn't just my family, it was her family." Terry's words touched many in the courtroom, and it became a strong argument in favor of the prosecution. The judges and the jury, listening to his testimony, were shocked, as was everyone else. Emotional evidence and undeniable evidence did their job. The jury was confident of the guilt of all 4 defendants. After several days of discussions, the court handed down the verdict. Charlie Wilkinson and Charles Wade were sentenced to life in prison without parole for their involvement in the brutal murder and arson. At the trial, Wilkinson realized that Erin had never loved him, that she had only used him, he shared. Erin Caffey was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 2 life sentences plus a third term of 25 years. Most likely, she will never get out of prison. Even if she is released on parole, she will have to serve another 25 years, the prosecutor said. Bobby Johnson received 40 years in prison for pleading guilty. In prison, they continue to correspond with Charles Wade. After the verdict, Terry Caffey stated that he forgave Erin, despite everything that happened. "I forgive her not for her sake, but for my own," he said. "You can't live with such hatred in your heart. I want her to understand what she's done and find a way to redemption someday." Terry has dedicated his life to performing and helping others. He wrote a book about his life after the tragedy, in which he talked about his path to forgiveness and recovery. "I will never forget that night," Terry said at one of his performances. "But I learned to live with this pain and found a way to use it for good. If my story can help at least one person avoid such a tragedy, then it's not in vain." Erin Caffey's story remains a grim reminder of how teenage experiences can lead to irreversible consequences. This case highlights the importance of awareness about the mental health of adolescents and the need to support them when they face difficulties. For everyone who learned about this tragedy, it became a lesson about the need to be attentive to your loved ones and not ignore the signs that someone may need help. She also reminds us of the importance of forgiveness and the ability to find the strength to move on, even after the most severe losses. Erin Caffey and her accomplices, who are in prison, will forever remain an example of how one wrong decision can destroy the lives of many people. But it is also a story about the power of the human spirit, which, despite everything, continues to fight for hope, healing, and justice.